Now, without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce today's speaker, David Griega, SVP Market Understanding. David, you have the floor.
Thank you, Ellen, and thank you everybody for joining today. Hope everybody's managing the COVID situation well and everyone's family is hopefully healthy and safe. We do want to talk today about some advances we've been making in the segmentation space. And in that, how we're able to connect segments that we can capture via surveys and connect them through different parts of your organization to different databases and connect closer to consumers in that process. So we view segmentation as really a lens that can guide how the business is viewed. In doing so, there's certain marketing efficiencies that should come from having a tightly defined and profitable target, knowing what their needs are and how to connect with them in the digital space and in other areas, so we're delivering the right messages to the right person as closely as possible. If we have that set up correctly, we're then able to create a lot of value to our business, both through this lens of brand positioning and brand development and creative communications and developing an innovation or product development pipeline. And lastly, segmentation can be the lens that connects and aligns different stakeholders or initiatives through a company. So oftentimes we'll hear the segment and the names that we come up with and work with our client partners on become really part of the internal jargon or the lexicon that the business uses, always talking about a specific segment that everyone refers to and knows exactly what that segment means, what the person is, the types of interests they have, the behaviors they exhibit, and the opportunities that they can represent for the business. But historically, segmentation research has suffered through some common pitfalls, and chances are a lot of people on this line today have experienced this at one point or another. So at times there could be an overemphasis on the method used and not really the impact it's delivering for the business. So things on the method could be around survey scales used. It could be around the type of clustering techniques used. Are we going to use a K-means segmentation, latent class, neural networks, etc.? So while those are important to have and apply the right tools to the problem, the focus should really be on making sure that we're delivering the right impact and having the business objectives in mind at the forefront of our approach at all times. The other part that comes from this is lacking true targetability in market, and it kind of goes hand in hand with the impact piece, because the segmentation that we can't find that segment or those people in market, we can't reach them with our new products or our communications or deliver the communications at the right moments, doesn't have the impact. You won't be able to gain the efficiencies or improve the ROI of all those efforts without being able to have that targeting piece. And the two of those essentially leads to the third point, which is not enough value is created and the process can take too long. So if we start a segmentation approach and 6 months later we have segments and they're hard to find in market, that's not creating the value for the business. And some of the initial stakeholders may have moved on to different roles, or the energy for the project can sometimes lose steam. So we wanted to create a process that fixes and corrects for these common pitfalls. In doing so, we've created what we call our Ipsos connected segmentation approach. At the heart of it, what we're looking to do is to drive growth for your business, increasing the profitability and clearly outlining where to play and how to win in those spaces, whether that is targeting specific consumer segments or need states or occasions, or even looking at a business-to-business segmentation. So there's really 4 components that we'll go through today that are paramount to this offer, and they're integrated together. The first is we've made the survey and the process more engaging. So what this ultimately does is it provides better data, better inputs into the segmentation, because we don't have that 45-minute exhaustive hiring survey for the respondents to go through. So we'll show some examples of different types of questions we're using and our ability of how we can make that questionnaire shorter so that the data is richer, more insightful, and I think we can all agree that the outcome of segmentation is highly dependent on what is going into the input phase. So we want that input to be as robust and as valid as possible through this new engaging survey. Once we have those inputs, what do we do with that? And that's where there's data science come in. And we're using the latest and most relevant tools to give us a way that we can take away that question of what type of segmentation are we using, what type of clustering algorithm are we using. So we've actually using the power of machine and machine learning to scale that up and to be able to run hundreds, maybe 1,000 segmentation solutions at once, and then for us and our client partners to then say, what's the right one for our business? Which one's addressing our needs the best and is giving us the right target and potentially secondary target to go after? The last part is what we call micro-targeting. So this is really using the leverage of digital and behavioral databases, connecting our segments to those databases so that we improve the targetability. So that now we aren't restricted to just the information in the survey to find people in data management platforms or CRM databases and know where to target our messages, but we're leveraging the information from those databases themselves to build richer segment profiles and to increase that targetability and ultimately gain marketing efficiency and improve ROI. And lastly is activation focus. I think, any good segmentation will come with an activation phase and a streamlined report with a workshop. But how we approach those workshops, the tools and frameworks and partners that we can bring into that gives us a way to elevate and maximize the impact coming from those activation sessions, both from a strategic consultancy lens, but also from applying behavioral science to the targets, understanding why they're making the decisions and have the motivations they do, and why they're making the decisions that they're making in terms of brand choice and shopping behaviors. So as we transition to the first part, which is increasing the engagement. So I mentioned we revamped our survey, and we're looking for a holistic response. We want consumers to tell us in their own words, using more free-form responses when they can, and applying visuals to tell us what's meaningful for them. We've also shortened the questionnaire because we can connect to those databases and behavioral databases I've mentioned. And a lot of the questions we've included are grounded in behavioral science principles. So two of those that we want to highlight today are how we apply visual metaphors when we ask consumers about what's important to them, what motivates them overall, which could be, if you're thinking about a more durable purchase, consumer electronics or auto, that's something we might want to understand what their needs are at a macro sense, kind of in the individual sense, versus something where it might be on an occasion or a need state basis. What are you looking for on the occasion when you had a beverage, and on the away from home beverages or at home beverages? So that motivation can vary by the context. So we want to understand what that is through a more engaging way that we can tap into information that we might not be able to capture just using a pre-listed set of questions. And the next one is using response time. So to understand how brands can perform. So this is really about more around not creating the segment themselves, but understanding how do you win for that consumer segment? How do you position your brand in a given need state or for a consumer segment? So understanding what are the associations of the brand, both at the implicit level, so those more automatic or intuitive choices and decisions when you might be on your routine buying behaviors, versus what happens on the more explicit associations when you're in a more thoughtful or mindful situation, because we know that decisions are made, there's a duality of that, where there's more mindful or more mindless decisions being made. So we want to capture that so we're given the right guidance in terms of how to win in a given moment. So we use the visual metaphors because visuals are processed faster than words, and we're becoming an ever increasingly visual society. With first we had Facebook, so we could share our photos and images with our friends. And then it's Instagram, where it's all about the image and the video. So we know that those where visual culture and pictures have meaning. So we've created and curated a set of 200 images in our database that we use in our exercise that have been tagged to have strong metaphoric meaning to basic human consumer motivations. So there's some images that may talk about fun and enjoyment, others that are more around connecting or control or security, peace and calm. So there's about 8 motivations we use in our framework. We call it Syncytium, but they're tied to that. And there's 2 important things here. One is no person sees 200 images. We want this to be a very fast exercise. So when people go through this, they'll typically see just 25 or 30 images. And what's really important is we want to capture what those images mean to the person. So if you look at the images here, there's one about beer bottles, there's one about looks like a swing ride at a carnival. What those represent could be different for each person on this phone. Generally, there will be a theme that they represent fun or calmness, but it's very individualized. We want to capture that. The way we do that is by allowing consumers to tell us what these images mean in their own words. So first we would ask, how would you select 5 images, the first 5, that help you express the needs in the category? What are you looking for from refreshing beverages? What are you looking for this beverage on an occasion when you're out of home? And they'll go through the images. Once they click on that 5th one, they don't get a chance to then think about it and go through and tell exactly which ones are the most important. It's the first 5, they go to the next screen, and this is what we really care about. What do these images represent? And we probe a few times to the open end. So that is what we really care about. So they're expressing to us in their own words what is important to them on this occasion or for this need. When they tell us this way versus just asking to open end without the visual prompt, we get much more data. The data comes in, we get 5 to 6 times as many words or thoughts coming through, and we also get what tend to be more emotional or deeper or thoughtful responses. So it's a much richer, relevant data set. So what we do with that is we apply smart text analytics, oftentimes using our Syncytium framework, which is it's a motivational framework that ties to those basic motivations people have. In the example we're showing here, this was for kind of app-based ride-hailing. So what we found was there were 2 or 3 main dimensions as to why people might choose to use an Uber or a Lyft or other type of service like that. And this what we're showing is there was a clear fun dimension. People were using that to go out to fun, maybe to go out and not have to worry about designated driver or see their friends or go to some activity that, we might all wish that we were doing at the moment. So it's really a fun setting. And a big contrast to that were those people who were using, say, an Uber or a Lyft for more control or security. They were looking for the ease of app use, knowing when the time was arriving, that it's always reliable, it's going to be a clean, safe car. So, and it could save time or money. So that big dichotomy of just by asking the open ends told us these parts. I think the key part, the one key element also is we capture sub-themes that wouldn't be present. If we just asked, are you using it for fun or security, we don't capture the sub-themes. Here, we can capture sub-themes around, I'm going to connect with friends. I'm going to show off that I'm in the right mindset, the right place. So by capturing the themes of fun means different things to different people is captured as well. The next part is really tapping into how do people make choices for brands. So we want to understand for each segment, what brands are they choosing and why are they choosing those brands. So by capturing what we call multi-choice response time, we're going beyond just the stated response of brand association. So it's not just that they link the attribute and attribute it to a certain brand. Are they doing that with an intuitive sense? Are they doing it quickly or slowly? And how does that segment make their decisions generally? Are they a more thoughtful, considered decision maker, or are they more, reactionary, seat of the pants, more, making more automatic decisions? So, and by using the multi-choice response time, we're able to capture response time and implicit associations, not just for one brand at a time, but for all the brands in the set, because we're capturing the speed of each click, of each association, and the order of association. So this example revitalizes me. If that is connected to Pepsi first and then 7-Up, that order tells us a certain pattern. That Pepsi can be more intuitive. But if we just asked, do you associate Revitalize to me with Pepsi and 7-Up, if they both said yes, then that may not give us the analytic power, understanding the true role of the brand. From this exercise, we can capture 2 key dimensions. One is how relevant or how important is each benefit, emotional, functional benefit, or personality benefit to the user, both at a category at large level and also within a segment. And then the brand fit. Does the brand have an advantage versus a competitive set or potential weakness? So if we know what's important, if we know how the brand performs intuitively and explicitly, we can then capture how can we win for that target. The next part is around data science. So our segmentation evaluation system really takes our analytic power to, this isn't an evolutionary step. This is more a revolutionary jump step we feel for analytic power. So we're really rewriting the rules to find profitable segments. First is we're focusing on the business outcome. We aren't picking, do we run k-means or latent class or neural network to find our solution. We're running all of them at once. And the power of the machine really helps us do this. So we can run thousands of segments. We can run every type of clustering, prominent relevant clustering approach out there, and run it by a number of segments. So we make 3 segment solutions up to 10 segment solutions. So we're capturing all the possible outcomes. What happens then is internally we'll get a scorecard of a sense that says, on the key criteria we're looking for, how do these segmentation solutions perform? Are some more discriminating than others? Which ones are finding segments that are most targetable, have the shortest typing tool, or the ones that have the most profitable openness to the brand? So which ones are going to really deliver on the business outcomes we're looking for? And what it does is it gives us an analytic framework both for creating all those segment solutions and then analyzing them to find the right ones that we can then bring the 2 or 3 that we think are most promising to you for an interim workshop. So to show a little bit more, so the back screen on this, you can just imagine, it's a scorecard where it's taking all the things that we can look for and comparing them across the different segment solutions that we've created. So what are we looking for? What defines a great segmentation solution? There's a few things we're looking for. One is that there's a balance or minimum level of segment size. So if we have a segment that is 4% of the population, that's not going to be highly relevant or useful for any business. We want to make sure that there's things that there's some level of proportion to it. We're looking for distance measures. Are the segments meaningfully distant or different enough from each other? And also that there's a discrimination within a segment. So what discriminates segment 1 from segment 2? And is that something that we find to be meaningful? Is there sufficient replicability to the segment? So we don't want to find a solution that just says, oh, in this one way we look at the data, we found this unique solution, and that's a good thing because that might just be something happening with the process. We want to find something that we're finding and we can repeat that solution. There's 2 other key points. One is on a typing tool. I would say a lot of times we might see typing tools come across our desk that have a lot of questions, 30 or 40 questions in that. But if we want a typing tool to find segments and feature surveys, that's not very helpful because we don't have 30 or 40 questions or that space for that to put into a new survey. So by looking at these segment solutions, we're automatically telling us how many variables do we need to replicate this solution in a different data set, in a different survey. So we're going to come out and make sure that it's useful in the future. So what's shown here are more the common variables that we'd be looking at, but we can also add in the custom variables around what's going to be a profitable segment for the organization or for the brand or business, and also anything that's really custom to their specific objectives. If there's a directive that says we want to find segments that are different on a certain dimension, we can add that into our scorecard so that we're looking for that at every step. So this ultimately saves us a lot of time in the back and forth iteration of manually reviewing output from a different segment solution, manually saying what's different versus, oh, we ran a solution that, on Wednesday we made some changes, and on Thursday we run it again. What's different between the two runs? Here we're doing it at one shot, and we're able to analyze it much quicker and move the process along much faster with the confidence that we are leveraging the latest and most relevant data science available. Next, we'll move into micro-targeting. So making sure that our segments can be actioned and findable and develop our communications to reach them where they are. I think this is really important as people are online more now than they were even a month ago. So digital advertising and targeting was already hugely important, and with the COVID-19 situation, I think it's even taken on an increased importance. So whether it's looking at what are those digital behaviors, where do I find our segments that we might create from the ground up, or adding this type of process onto existing segments you might have, this becomes an important area, especially for today's environment. So when we say micro-targeting, we're using that to refer to linking our survey-based segments and our target segments to different digital or behavioral databases. There's three types of databases loosely grouped here that we can connect with. One is proprietary to Ipsos, which is using our Synthesia, which is a company we recently acquired. So the Synthesia platform leverages the Facebook Ad Manager data to capture the behavioral signals. That's not only limited to what's on Facebook and Facebook-owned properties, but it captures all those websites and digital activities that people have that lead into going to Facebook, or that Facebook has access to. So a lot of times, there's opt-ins or cookies that are reporting information back to Facebook. So all that information is connected. So really, they know a lot about all the activities that a person is doing. It's not just restricted to their platforms. The middle group is data management platforms. So looking at those ones that can serve for advertising targets, placing digital ads. So there's a lot of companies here with Adobe, Google, even Acxiom data, a little bit more of a different type of data set. But we can connect to those by building a bridge between our survey and those platforms. Building that bridge is important because that's going to enable us to do a quality link. The way that works is we need to understand which, at the kind of onset of the project, what databases you might want to link to on the back end and find your targets in, and be able to exceed some of those questions into our survey. So we do need to take a few minutes of survey space to be able to kind of make that linkage. But it's a process that runs pretty smoothly as long as we have the upfront set up correctly and we know and we ask the right questions to begin with about what databases want to be used in the end. And the last would be a client or an agency-specific database that connects to specific transaction data and leverages information that you're holding more concretely that we can link to. What's good about this process is we can tap into a little bit more of the individual linkages and actually survey people who we know are part of that database and improve the ability to link and find people that way. So I started touching on this a little bit. So when we make a link, we can use two main types of approaches. One is aggregate modeling. So that's what we're using, an approach that either looks to define, okay, if we define a segment, here are the key traits that you can use to define and query that group and find them in a data management platform. So we're looking for people within a certain demographic profile who have certain behaviors or follow certain brands, maybe follow certain types of music interests or media habits. So we're going to go out and query, and we're not going to find the exact people what we're looking for. We're saying we want to find a group of people who look like this target, who exhibit these types of behaviors based on the information in the database. So they'll come back and they can give us millions of records around people who look like that you can then serve your advertisement or communications to. Then the next one would be more the individual level modeling. This is when we have people directly connected in our survey to their profile in the database. So this requires more steps around getting opt-in and personal information identifiable PII agreements in place. Once we do this, though, there is a power in that says if we can find people in our survey and exactly in a CRM database, for example, we can then create the query to type the rest of the people in that database using a mix of the behavioral transactional data from the database plus our survey data. So it gives us an increased accuracy as we profile the rest of that database. In the next step, I want to talk a little bit more about a specific process and case we used on the aggregate modeling approach. So this was we're going to take a 4-step process. The first one is identify the target segments. So that's using a mix of the approach I described earlier with an engaging survey, using our SDS or segment evaluation system to define profitable targets. We then create the query to find lookalike audiences in our Synthesio platform in this example. So that is, we're going to be looking for people who look like segment A in the Facebook properties. And what comes back are tens of thousands of rows of data that covers everything from the types of music they listen to, the type of TV shows they watch, what they're doing on Netflix, the influencers they follow, the brands they're interested in, the hobbies that they enjoy. Are they outdoor sports enthusiasts? Are they avid readers? So everything that we know about them, everything that's being collected to that digital ecosystem comes back. We then analyze that in step 3 to create what we call enhanced segment profiles. So now that segment profile isn't just limited to what we captured in the survey, but we have all this other information we can append to it. And that's one of the reasons we can make the survey shorter to begin with, is because we know at the back end we have the ability to append all this rich data that is based, we can never ask that much data in the survey, and now it's real data because it's capturing their actual activities. So now at the end of step 3, if we have segments and profiles that are defined both on their needs and attitudes and behaviors and demographics from the survey, plus their actual digital profile data or their online actions, now we have the ability to create an even more precise, more accurate, more descriptive query about that segment. We know more key traits that we can use to find them. So now we can say, let's go back to the process and say that now let's create the key traits and query to use based on Synthesio data and survey data to find that target audience in maybe an Adobe DMP platform to say, okay, so now we want to target our ads to segment A. Well, let's tell our agency, let's work with our partners to say, this is what segment A looks like. And we include all that wealth of information, so now we can get a better target and market. Again, it's more efficient with a higher ROI in the return. So the case where we did this was with Signify, which formerly was Philips Lighting, and they were an initial leader in the smart home or connected lighting market. So as often is the case, when new categories emerge and start to gain traction, there's a first mover advantage, and Signify or Philips Lighting at the time held that with their Philips Hue line. But as that category starts to mature a little bit and more competitors come in, and competitors that can start to compete more aggressively and start to carve out niches for them, the first mover advantage starts to winnow away a little bit. So what they had to do when they came to us to say, how do we retain leadership? Who are the right customers to go after, and how do we go after them? So we did that by finding a group that was really enthusiastic about the home lighting category, a group that would want to always be kind of the vanguard or the early adopter of the category. And then, so we developed the targeting the segments from the survey. And then we added on, how do we reach them? Especially because this is a smart techie category, we knew there's going to be a lot of online behavior. So the screenshots here talk to the hobbies and interests that we came up with, the different brands or TV shows that we could use, the music they were into. And I know it's hard to see, but the bottom right would be a correspondence map or perceptual map that overlaps all the activities we can connect with the different segments. So now we know who's that enthusiastic group, who's most likely to become the leading segment of this category, and how do we connect with them. Since we've delivered this work, it has been at the kind of forefront of their continued targeting strategy and value proposition development. The last one I want to talk about is is activation. So, of course, we can come and we would work with you to define how do we bring these segments to life, but we want to go beyond that. So some of the frameworks that we use can be around developing those segment personas and specifically to how do you market them? What are the marketing do's to the segment? What are the marketing don'ts? So it's important that everybody in the organization has that clear understanding and develops the creative personas and can internalize and relate to the segments. But we want to take it the next step and understand what are the specific marketing do's and don'ts. We also look at what's the strategy development. So which of these segments do we go after? How do we go after them? What right do we have to win here? And come up with that, with the really strategy, the vision, and some tactics and owners for that. And for cases where there's multiple brands looking, we have a framework that we can bring to look at what's the portfolio alignment, which brand should we maybe keep or delist, which one should we focus and align with specific segments. There's other frameworks we can bring. We just wanted to highlight that as we come to these sessions, we want to make sure that we have clear objectives and bring the frameworks to play. As we do that, we can partner with two of our internal partners. One is Ipsos Strategy 3, which is really they operate more on the kind of branding or consultancy level. So they're strategy consultants, and they're really three principles. They lead with strategy first, making sure that we're hyper-focused on those business outcomes and deliver against it and bring their vast expertise to the process. So they align and can have that conversation around how do we look against our competition or outside of our competition and bring in influences from kind of every corner that we can look at. The other group is our Behavioral Science Center. So they're really helpful at bringing, through the B-side lens, how do we influence shopping behavior? How do we nudge people to certain behaviors that we're looking for, the next behavior they think we can add? When people tell us what their need, what their motivations are, they can also provide the framework to say, how is that different? How do we articulate that need? Is there something that they're not even still not articulating that is going to be helpful for us to understand? So as we think about activation through both the business sense and the insights lens and the creative marketing advertising lenses that often occur in these sessions, adding in the perspectives from the Strategy 3 group and our Behavioral Science Center become helpful to make sure that we're maximizing the impact. And the last part of the connection is we talked about connecting to our consumers, connecting to different databases and different science techniques, but we also want to make sure that we're connecting to key stakeholders in your organization and key decisions that you can make. So how do we integrate our segments with our CM database, with brand health tracking, innovation development, shopper research, media planning strategy? So as we connect those through the workshops, and we can have the specific workshops around innovation. How do we innovate? How do we develop products against or new services to a solution? Or what does this mean for the shopper marketing team and our retail partners? How do we bring the segmentation to them? So we have specific lenses that we look at through any of the activation areas. So we want to make sure that we connect it to every possible realm of the organization that we can, to make sure that we're maximizing the impact and we avoid those pitfalls we talked about at the beginning of the conversation around a segmentation taking too long with not enough value created. So these processes and connecting with our internal partners helps to prevent against that. So just in summary, the 4 key points of our connected segmentation approach so that we can really deliver more strategic activation and personalized content to our targets. It's more engaging. So we get deeper insights, richer insights. We don't have the respondent fatigue, and we're building our segments on data that is as rich and insightful as possible. It's state of the science. We're going to work faster. We're able to iterate quicker. We have segments that are going to be really optimized for specific business needs and can be actioned against. The micro-targeting, so we can increase targeting for communications by connecting our survey segments with different behavioral databases. And lastly, the activation focused. So going beyond just bringing segments to life and building the personas, but understanding marketing do's and don'ts, applying different frameworks to understand brand growth for each segment. So that's what I want to say. Thank you for attending today. We do have a couple of questions, and if you have other questions, please send them through. I will ask. Okay. So there was a question. Can we make a chart in the lower right bigger? I don't think I can. I assume the chart that we were looking at is here. So this chart in the lower right, if you imagine a big circle, that would be around a segment. And all the little text there are all the behaviors coming out of Synthesio that segment has. And if it's within a circle, then that segment that behavior is relevant to the segment. If it's far away from the circle, it's less relevant. So by mapping all the Synthesio digital behaviors to and overlaying the segments, you can visually see what's important for one segment, a circle, versus another segment, a different circle. So I was looking through for further questions that we can address in the group setting. So I think one question that we have here is how do we ensure how do we ensure we're able to find our segments in a different database? That was a question I touched on earlier, which is a lot involves the setup process. So understanding and having the right partners from our company and your organization to say at the end we want the company we use for our digital targeting and bring that agency in and making sure we understand what's in the database. So we would want to understand things like the type. We don't need the database. We need to understand the types of variables that are in the database. And then we can collectively hypothesize which of those do we think would make sense that would be discriminating, differentiating between segments we might find. And we need to understand how those are asked and maintained in the database. So if we know those two things, we can then craft questions to feed into our survey that can build as that bridge. So there's two questions here around price range of the solution. I think everyone can understand that price ranges can vary based on segment solutions. But what I can say, and we're happy to have that discussion and follow up directly individually to your situations. But one thing I would say is this is not a more expensive solution, as long as it's kind of right size. But for us to connect with profiling in Synthesio, using the data science, a lot of what's in here gains efficiencies. So as we gain efficiencies in one area, we're able to expand the usefulness and implementation of the data through the micro-targeting approaches that doesn't increase really the cost of running a segmentation study. So even though I think there's a lot here, hopefully that looks valuable and useful. It's something that we can do at really with working within traditional budgets. I'm not seeing any further questions, so at this time I think we can close the session. Again, I want to thank you for everybody for attending today. If you have follow-up questions, please reach out to us. As I mentioned, the recording will be on the website within 48 hours, I believe. And again, just thank you for your time, and hopefully everyone has a safe and healthy rest of the week. Thank you very much.